everyone, and welcome to Stan the Wine Man TV. I am your host, Stan Rattan, and this is the Blue Collar Wine Show, where I try to help you spend your wine dollar wisely. And today I have the special privilege of having Josh Maloney, wine director at Milbrandt Vineyards and Wahluke Crush Facility, right? Is that what they call it?
Wahluke Wine Company.
Wahluke Wine Company. Huge operation. How long were you the head red winemaker at St. Michel before you came here?
I was the red winemaker for St. Michel from 05 to 2011, so 6 years.
6 years.
And then I joined the Milbrandts in July, August of 2011, so a couple months before harvest started in 2011.
Yes. Okay, and before we get started in this interview and tasting the wines that Josh is responsible for, we're here at San Juan County Fair at the, we have the wines behind us with the ribbons.
Yeah, the wine and the beer.
I had the opportunity to help in judging the wines. That was a blast. And we have a little crowd here watching the video. That's fun. Thanks for joining us for the video. That's great. We just got done with an event last night. We had about 120 people there.
Big event, fun event, a lot of wines tasted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, there were a lot of wines tasted. In fact, we have a few of them here that we tasted last night. I wanted to ask you, Josh, listening to you last night and your passion for wine, what is your favorite? I mean, if you had to pick a favorite part or top two things that you enjoy about winemaking, the whole process, the whole world of winemaking, what is it?
All right, so, and to be fair to everyone watching this, before we sat down, Stan made me promise to try and keep my answers under a half an hour each. And that is going to be very, very difficult to pick just the top two or three things that I like the most about this industry. You know, I guess I was actually quoting, I think I was quoting Bill Nye last night when I was talking about the PB&J.
Yes.
The passion, the beauty, and the joy. There are elements of this job that are scientific, there's elements that are artistic, and bringing it all together at the same time, I think that's, you know, in essence, that's what I love about this job. Different times of year I love different things. I love blending, I love harvest. I'm getting excited for harvest. Harvest is coming up actually in a couple of days now. I love when I get to focus singularly on one thing for a little while. I also like the fact that it changes. I like that I've had real jobs before, and kind of doing you know, a 9 to 5, same thing every day, every month, every week of the entire year. I don't have the personality that can do that. I need something new all the time. So.
All right, cool. So I know that the chemistry part of it really intrigues you because you're very...
That's my degree is in chemistry. My background is in sciences. Yeah. But it's also, as I said, I try to approach in equal parts science and art. I didn't mention this to the group last night, but I almost didn't study sciences. I almost went into music instead. So I have that part of my brain working in overdrive all the time, along with the analytical side. And this is one of the few pursuits I could find that I think not just engages both sides, but challenges them on a daily basis.
So what was your musical instrument? Did you have a musical
I
instrument?
did. I was, yeah, well, I played piano when I was much younger. In high school, I played the trombone. I play the guitar now as well. I still play the piano a little bit, so get a few glasses of wine into me, I'll sing.
Well, let's start. Well, that's kind of cool. So you have that art side that probably helps in the winemaking, I would imagine.
I think it does. I think, you know, winemakers, we tend to have reputations of being prima donnas sometimes. And so I think that the really successful winemakers are the ones who, they're trying to say something with their wine besides, hey, isn't this a nice wine?
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. I noticed on these two wines here are Josh Maloney's has his own offshoot of winery called Maloney Wines. And this is a 2012 Elephant Mountain Vineyard Cab and a Scootney Flats Vineyard Cab on Red Mountain. This one's Rattlesnake Hills. I noticed you use Stelvin closure or twisties or screw caps. Maybe you could tell us why you prefer stealth enclosure over cork.
I started working with screw caps in the 2011 vintage with the Milbrandt wines, and you know, I think everyone's aware of the fact that a cork closure will have between 3 to 5% incidence of cork taint, where the wine will become infected with well, contaminated with a compound called TCA. It basically makes the wine smell like a musty basement. So that's my own money from my own bank account, from my own savings that went into buying those grapes and those barrels and that glass, and I wasn't willing to take 5% of my money and just throw it away. So I wanted to have something. I wanted to have something that was going to be safer. But the thing that I'm really impressed working with this kind of a closure is the fact that the bottle-to-bottle variation is almost completely eliminated from what you see with a natural cork closure.
Okay. Now, have you noticed, though, with there's certain things that you have to do as a winemaker more carefully with? I've heard that you have to be careful of reduction.
There's, yeah, particularly with tank-aged wines, there's a danger that if you don't treat the wine properly, as it gets close to bottling, that it'll start smelling like H2S, which is basically like stinky eggs, after the wine is bottled. However, this wine was aged in barrel for almost 2 years, and one of the best ways to make sure you don't get reduction is barrel aging. So for this particular winemaking, I didn't have to do anything different. For the Pinot Gris that we had last night at the tasting, for the Riesling, things like that, yeah, I have to do certain things before bottling to make sure the wine doesn't get reductive.
Okay. And maybe you could explain, do all you guys know what reduction is in a wine? Maybe you could explain when we say reduction.
Reduction, well, it's the opposite of oxidation, right? Everyone has a degree in chemistry, right? You know? So reduction, in winemaking, reduction is a process where literally there's not enough oxygen in the wine, and certain sulfur compounds form that have some fairly unpleasant aromas to most people. And I'm trying to think of something that you might have smelled that gets that. Can you think of anything that naturally occurring?
It gets reductive?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I could be out, but usually what I get in reduction on a wine is a real charcoal, like charcoal briquettes. That seems to be the flavor profile, like you're chewing on a charcoal briquette. Yeah,
sometimes there's a kind of an earthy character like that. Really simple reduction is just, like I said, stinky, kind of like rotten eggs a little bit. As a winemaker, after you go through several vintages, you see reduction at certain points during the fermentation process. You can kind of get used to it. In fact, you can see past it and learn to tell what is good reduction versus bad reduction versus reduction that will resolve itself naturally versus reduction that needs to be has to happen some kind of intervention. Otherwise, it's going to turn into something bad later on.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Now, one of the things that I've noticed about Washington State, we've been talking, you know, Chris Sparkman, he's the head of the Washington Wine Commission right now. I think it's like a 3-year, 10-year, 4-year.
I'm not sure what
anyway,
that is.
He was talking about the diversity of wines in Washington State. Another, Washington State is one of the few states in the United States where you can make just about any varietal of wine, and they turn out good. Is there a reason for that? I mean, like Tempranillo, Grenache, Cinsault, Mourvedre, the basics, Cab Merlot, Riesling, Chardonnay, Roussanne, Marsanne, they all seem to do well in Washington State. Have you ever given that thought, like why?
I hadn't, but it's actually it's a really neat observation. And thinking about it, it is something that to be proud of and that we should be talking about more. You know, there's not a lot of Pinot Noir that's grown in the state, but it could be. In fact, I've had some amazing Pinot Noir from the Gorge area.
Yes.
We do make sparkling wines here. We make dessert wines, and I'm trying to think. I've even had some amazing Zinfandel.
Yes.
So that, you know, there's a few varieties that are kind of calling cards of other states. Zin, of course, California. Pinot Noir, of course, Oregon, and there's more of an uphill battling with marketing those wines in Washington. But as far as growing it, no, there's pretty much we have such a wide a variety of climates and soils and ways of growing grapes, and we have so much amazing control over our irrigation. The fact that we're growing these grapes in a desert climate, and the only water these vines get is typically the water we give them. So we get to choose how fast they grow, when they grow. We get to control all those elements. And in many places in the world, they don't get that option. They're getting rain when they don't want it. They're getting either growth when they don't want it. They're getting shatter when the clusters are trying to set. And we have the luxury of not having that problem. But we still have all the water in the river for irrigation, so it's not like we're actually going to kill the vines by not watering.
Right, and probably the biggest threat to Washington wines is usually the early frost in the fall.
Yeah, we've had, remember 2009 was setting up to be a near perfect vintage. And then on October 10th and 11th, the temperature dropped really, really fast. And basically everything on the Walloon slope got frosted out. And October 10th and 11th is way too early for Cabernet to be picked in that area. So we had a lot of stuff that was coming in early, which was unfortunate. We haven't had, I need to knock on something. We haven't had an early frost in a number of years, which is nice that we get the hang time that we want. But it's only a matter of time before we have another one.
Sure, sure. Walla Walla seems to have the worst problem with the early frost.
That not just at the end of the season, but the beginning of the season as well, and also winter injury. We had some really cold weather last November, and there were some vineyards in Walla Walla that got wiped out. 2010, there was another big freeze event in November, and Shampoo Vineyard pretty much got wiped out at that point. They had to replant. So, but Walla Walla usually is the worst of it.
Now, my favorite appellation in Washington State is Red Mountain.
Okay.
I actually think Red Mountain wines are superior to Walla Walla in many ways, except maybe the rocks. I think some of those wines coming out of that side of Walla Walla are really phenomenal.
Okay.
But just in general, Red Mountain to me seems to have this really interesting quality about it, and Scootney Flats is Red Mountain. How do you feel about Red Mountain? I mean, is that like, I know you work for the Milbrandt boys who have Walloon Slope wines.
Well, yeah, and obviously
and they make good grapes, of course.
I can't comment on your comment about what's because I got to go face these people in a couple of days.
Come on, Butch, have a sense of humor.
But I guess I'll cop out and say that they're all different, unique in their own way. Red Mountain, it has the reputation of being the hottest appellation in the state, and there are some years when the Walloon Slope is actually hotter. So, but the soil type and it's not just how much heat it gets over the course of the year; it's when it gets it, and also how much it cools off at night or doesn't cool off. It impacts all those elements. I love Red Mountain fruit. I love Walloon Slope fruit, but I like them for different things.
Right. All right, we're going to get started on the wines here. By the way, these are available, aren't they? If anybody's interested in buying.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Maloney wines. If you go to MaloneyWine.com, you can sign up for the mailing list.
I'll put the link.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. We only have one retail outlet where the wine's being sold right now. Do you know where that is, Stan?
I think it's King's Market.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, we just bought a case for the store, so it's down there.
But the rest of it we ship to most states, and most of the sales we've done have been direct to consumer so far, and the reception's been quite good for it.
Yeah. So we're going to do a little close-up of this is the 2012 Elephant Mountain Vineyard, which is in Rattlesnake Hills, which is in Yakima, part of the Yakima appellation. Single vineyard cab. It's $65, right?
$65 retail, yeah.
Okay. So there, we'll give a little. Where am I? Oh, there we are. There we are. Hopefully they can see that. Right.
So the way this project came about was I just started working for the Milbrandts. It's closed right now. And I'd known that I'd always wanted to make wine under my own label, but I never really knew what I wanted to do, like in terms of what the face of that project would look like. And I'd worked with this fruit before at St. Michel, and I'd always loved it. And so I contracted a few tons off there in 2012. And I was also going to try to contract a few tons off of Red Mountain, and I realized I didn't have enough money for it. So I got this fruit, and I got the barrels for it, and I made it, and it turned out lovely. But in my mind, I kind of fast forward a couple of years, I'm thinking, well, if I keep making that same wine every single year, I might get bored with it. And so I looked into getting the Red Mountain fruit for the following year, but I realized I couldn't do both. I still couldn't afford both of them. And then I hit upon this concept of, why not do a single vineyard, varietally pure Cabernet every year, but change the vineyard around? So, you know, it was an interesting concept. A lot of the winemakers I was explaining it to told me how stupid it was, which actually encouraged me that it was probably a good idea, because I was getting, you know, if you think about it, visionaries and lunatics get the same kind of feedback about their ideas.
That's true.
And when you're getting that kind of feedback, you start questioning which one you are. So the jury's still out, buddy.
So what is it about Elephant Mountain fruit that you particularly like? What facet? Because I know you're a big terroir guy, which I really appreciate. I can't believe there's still people out there arguing about terroir.
I don't even engage in those conversations. Yeah.
I don't anymore either.
Yeah. Elephant Mountain, to me, it embodies a lot of the elements that I think make Washington wine so unique and so special. I mean, a little bit about the site. It's considered to be in a cool appellation in terms of temperature, but it sits about 1,300 feet in elevation, and there's this big basalt outcropping right behind the vineyard that radiates heat back onto the vineyard itself. So the fruit still comes off relatively late for Cabernet, typically the end of October, so it gets a lot of hang time, relatively shallow soils, and it produces just incredibly dark colored reds, very, very intense. The tannins can become really aggressive if you're not careful, and so it takes a very delicate hand to make the wines. But in addition to being very dense and very deep color, having a lot of tannin, they've got these incredibly rich mid palates. They're also very, very bright and herbal at the same time. So, and that's one of the things I love about a Washington Cabernet, is that we have both the fruit and the earth.
You can definitely get it's. We just shook this wine, opened it up and shook it, so it hasn't been opened up a long time. Of course, on this YouTube, my series of YouTube episodes that I've done, I always try to emulate what I feel 90% of the consumers are going to do. Mm-hmm. They're going to uncork the wine. Within an hour, they're going to drink it.
Yep.
I mean, so usually I uncork my wines in the morning, and then when I do the shoot at lunch, it's been open that long, which is probably a little longer than most people leave them open. I encourage decanting, but I know most people don't take the time to decant. They think they need to have some special decanter. You can just dump it. By the way, you can just dump it in a Kool-Aid pitcher. It doesn't need to be fancy.
That's actually when we serve this wine at home, and we don't do it that often. We'll typically in the morning, I'll open it up and I'll pour it into a measuring cup, and then I'll pour it back into the bottle afterwards. And then, you know, people ask me, should you put the cap back on and leave the cork, or the cork if you're doing it with a cork finished wine? It doesn't really make that bit of difference. I put the cap back on just because I know I'm going to knock it over accidentally.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Now, this is incredible intensity in this wine. A lot of tobacco, which I think is pretty interesting. Very spicy too. You like to use French oak.
This is about, this is 50% French oak. It's amazing that the acidity on the finish is quite, it's quite bright, but, and that's one of the things that this site is known for, is having really, really bright acids. So 50% new French oak, and I chose a barrel that was water bent, which it's normally considered a good barrel for white wines, because the water bending process, it degrades some of the tannins in the barrels a little bit, so it doesn't actually build up the wine too much. and I knew that the fruit was going to have a lot of tannin to begin with, and so I didn't want to add to it. But it also, these particular barrels help lift the nose. And again, I chose techniques to ferment it and age it that would enhance the natural characters already in the site. So,
Well, it certainly is a beautiful wine.
thank you.
I think this easily, I would give this 10 to 15 years.
Oh,
To really, really come to life.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a beautiful wine now, but I think,
It's come a long way
10.
since it was bottled a
oh
year
yeah,
ago.
I tasted this barrel, from the barrel, didn't I last year?
Yeah, when you were at the winery
Yeah.
last year, it tasted from the barrel, and it was incredibly tight.
Yes, yes,
But,
it
but,
was.
the potential was there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the one element to me, aromatically, that's very unique about that site that I love. Did you get the fennel
Yes.
in the nose?
Oh yeah.
It's a kind of
Well,
a,
it's
you know,
even in the palate a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
and I don't see that in a lot of the other places that I work with. So.
Pretty cool. So the second one is 2013, so it's very young. You just bottled this.
Bottle, that's, yeah, we're going on 8 days of bottle age right now.
Okay. So this is single vineyard, Scootney Flats Vineyard, Red Mountain, 2013.
Scootney Flats is, it's one of two vineyards that's owned